Hi guys, welcome to another week of distance digital learning. I really sincerely miss you so much. I hope that you're all doing okay and that you're not getting too terribly bored, but I just wanted to kind of start by talking about this week because if we were at school this week, we would be finishing this unit. So what's going on is tomorrow we have our class time. It's the first one, second period. I'm gonna have an optional Zoom. I'll post the link for you guys on Google Classroom, but optional Zoom from 10 to 11 a.m. just to kind of check in, see each other's faces, feel good about that. And then this week, the assignments are kind of different from last week because I'm making this video for you guys that's about kind of an overview of the unit. And then also I am posting a review guide on Google Classroom that is required to fill out. You have to do it for a grade. You can do it with a friend. You can like FaceTime or whatever, but everyone needs to do it. And then this ed puzzle, there's a quizzes. I need you guys to all join the class on quizzes. So I sent you, I'll show you on Classroom. I guess I don't actually have Classroom open, but I'll open it. Everyone needs to join the quizzes class, and there's a link on Classroom that you guys need to click to make sure that you have joined that class. Because there's an assignment that's the quizzes. You can play it 3 times. Your highest score is the score that I'm going to count. So it's not supposed to be hard. Just, make sure that you do it 3 times, get a good score. Here's the link right here to join the class. It says mobile link. You need to click it and actually join it. It will ask you to put your parents' email. You don't have to put your parents' email. I just need you to click accept on the invitation. So please do that. And you see right there that there's an assignment that you need to do. It's the pathology quiz, and it will let you play it 3 different times. Okay, so going back to this week. And then the last thing is a Google form. The Google form is on Google Classroom. It will be. It's not there yet, but it will be. And it's this end of unit. It's like a quiz for this unit. So that I need you to do individually. The thing about it is you can use your notes. You can use the old ed puzzle videos. You can use any of the stuff on Google Classroom that I sent you last week, your OneNote. You just cannot use your friends and you cannot Google. And I will be checking to make sure that those are in your own words and that you wrote them, from your heart. So that's kind of the overview of this week. So this video with the questions, the review guide on Google Classroom, the quizzes that you can play 3 times, and this Google form that I'm showing you now. On the quizzes, if you get a good score the first time and you don't want to play 3 times, you don't have to play 3 times. It's just your highest score is the one I'm going to take. So there you go on that. Okay, let me go over this review guide with you guys. That's about pathogens. It's about this whole unit. So there is a longer review. This is the first part of the review guide, and I'm going to go over it actually in this video. But there are a few more questions that I'm not going to go over, which I can answer for you if you join the Zoom. Or if you just send me a remind or whatever, if you're stuck on something, I'll answer you then too. But I'm going to go over the chart part in this video so that I can make sure that everybody has that part. So here I go. All right. So for cell types, viruses are not cells. Hopefully you remember that viruses are actually non-living. So they don't have cells. So in cell type, you can put N, NA, or you can put no cells. Just so you know, they don't have cells. They're not living. Protists are eukaryotic, which means that they have a nucleus. Bacteria are prokaryotic, which means that they have no nucleus. And then fungi are eukaryotic, which means that they have a nucleus. So last week we learned about protists and fungi, and I talked to you guys about how protists are kind of like the junk drawer. They're like everything that doesn't really have a specific place goes into protists. And then fungi are eukaryotic but heterotrophic, which means they can't make their own food. They have to eat other things, and usually they're decomposers. We'll talk about that later on in this chart. Okay, so for reproduction, viruses are either lytic, which means that they like take over the cell, turn it into a virus factory, start reproducing themselves, and basically like explode the cell. That's lytic. That's like the flu. Or they're lysogenic, which means that they kind of hide inside the cell, and then eventually they will like be triggered to become active. And when they become active, then they'll like go into the lytic cycle and eventually explode the cell. And they'll start like showing symptoms at that point. They also could be a retrovirus like HIV, which means that they have RNA and they like convert that to DNA, and then can kind of like hide out in the cell just like a lysogenic virus. But I'm not going to write that one, but they could also be a retrovirus. And basically for viruses, like what you need to know is that they must have a host to reproduce. And that's what makes them non-living, is that they have to have a host. If they don't have a host, they can't reproduce, they can't survive. For protists, they can be asexual, which is more common, or they can be sexual, which is less common. So I'll just say asexual is more common. And then for bacteria, they are asexual using something called binary fission, which is basically like a really fast way that they can copy themselves. They also can be sexual using conjugation, which means that they share plasmids with other bacteria using their pili. If that sounds confusing to you, go back to your bacteria notes in OneNote and they're in there. Or go to my bacteria notes if you don't have good notes, but they're in there. And then for a fungi, they are asexual or sexual. If they're sexual, then they use spores, which are basically like super, super simple seeds that don't have any outer covering. And the spores would come out of the mushroom because the mushroom is like the fruiting body, which means like reproductive organ of the fungus. That was in your video last week. Okay. For special structures, there can be many right answers to these. And in your review guide, like there's many things you can put and still be right. For a virus, you could have capsid, which is the protein coat. You could have glycoprotein, which is, I'll say like tricks host cell into accepting the virus. You also could have viral envelope, which is like a membrane that goes around the virus. And you could even have like genetic material, DNA or RNA. That's pretty much it for a virus. For a protist, which is the next column, protist, there are a few different ones we talked about in the video last week. So you could have like a pseudopod, which is an amoeba, which is for movement. Let's say move and eat. You could have flagella, which is for moving. You could have cilia, which is for moving. You also could have like contractile vacuole, which is for removing extra water. And there were a few other ones in the video from last week. You could have had like oral groove, which is for, it's like a mouth. You could have like gullet, which connects to the food vacuole. You could have food vacuole. There are many that you could have for that one. Then for bacteria, again, there are like several right answers, but you could definitely have pili, which are for exchanging plasmids. Plasmids are circular DNA pieces that are only like 1 to 3 genes, and that's how they pass resistance. So you also could have plasmid here. So I'll say pass resistance. You could have flagella there for movement. Some bacteria have flagella. You could have capsule, which is like a slime layer that allows it to like stick to its host. Fimbriae also are used to stick to the host. And you could even have like toxins. Bacteria produce toxins that allow them to like make you feel sick. So you could have any of those, or there are several others that you could have had also and be right. For fungus, the main ones that we talked about are fruiting body, which releases spores. That's a mushroom. It's a fancy word for mushroom. Hyphae, which absorb nutrients. And mycelium, which is underground network of hyphae. Those are the main ones we talked about for a fungus. Okay, so if you're going to prevent against these types of diseases, prevention is what you do before you get sick to keep yourself from getting sick. So for a virus, the main one is a vaccine. And that's also true about bacteria. A vaccine is a medication. Well, not really medication. The vaccine is a usually like a shot that you get. It could be a pill, like for malaria. You can take a pill, but it's a something that you give yourself to train your immune system, and it has inactive parts of the pathogen so that your immune system cells are able to actually recognize that pathogen if it infects you for real. So it's basically like putting your immune system through training to make sure that you are ready if you do actually get that infection. Now, the reason that vaccines don't always work is that viruses and bacteria can mutate and actually change so that they're no longer, the training that you gave your immune system isn't perfect, isn't right, because the pathogen mutated and now is a little bit different. So, but a vaccine, like if there is one for that infection, is the best prevention, typically. Now, other preventions are the same ones that people are talking about crazy amounts right now. So, like hand washing, it's an N, hand washing, sanitation, social distance, which basically means like not putting yourself into contact with other people who have that infection. And this is true for all of them. For protists, especially, it's going to be like not drinking unsafe water. Or like if you're ever on a camping trip, a lot of protists are freshwater. And so if you get a protist disease, like the one in your Google Classroom document last week, Giardia is a water protist. So you get that if you like drink water from a lake when you're camping or something like that. So that's why you might have heard like boil water if you're going to drink it. That can be a prevention against that disease. For fungi, a big prevention is like keeping your skin clean and dry. because some examples of fungal infections are usually rashes. They're like ringworm, which is not actually a worm. It's a rash caused by fungus. Or like athlete's foot, you get those when your feet are like moist all the time, and like if you dry them out, take off your like wet socks or whatever, then you're less likely to get those. That can be a prevention. But overall, I would say hand washing, sanitation, a vaccine if there is one is the answer. Okay. So treatments are what you do after you are sick. So those are things that like you already don't feel good, you're already sick, and now you're trying to feel better. So for a virus, usually it's just hydration. There are some like antiviral medications like Tamiflu, if you've ever taken that for the flu. So I'll say some medications make it harder for virus to replicate. And that's what Tamiflu does. It basically like stops the virus's ability to bind to your cells so that it can't like make more viruses. For protists, the treatment is rest, sometimes medication, but it really depends on the protist. We'll say depends on disease. Because protists are, very diverse. We talked about that last week, and it's really going to depend on what that protist is on how you treat it. You're going to treat malaria really differently than you would treat like African sleeping sickness or Giardia. For bacteria, the biggest treatment is antibiotics. And antibiotics are only going to work on bacteria. Same thing, rest, hydration, all that, but antibiotics is the biggest bacterial treatment. It doesn't always work because sometimes the bacteria can be resistant to the antibiotic, but ideally it does work. Usually it works. And then for fungi, the treatment is usually some kind of like ointment. So I'll just say antifungal cream or ointment. Because usually if you have a fungal infection, it is a rash. And so it's some sort of like topical cream that you put on your skin in order to like kill off the fungus that's causing the rash. All right. Example diseases for viruses, the most we talked about HIV, we talked about chickenpox. Any of the viruses that you guys researched on your slides, obviously those are viruses. Coronavirus is a virus. Ebola. There are lots and lots. You can definitely be right and not have an answer that's in this box. For protists, we only talked about 3 of them, and they were on your Google Classroom doc. So there's sleeping sickness, malaria, and Giardia. And there are more, but those are the 3 that we've learned about. For bacteria, strep throat, tuberculosis, bubonic plague, cholera. And again, any of the ones that you made your slide on, your bacteria slide, counts. That's right. And then for fungi, athlete's foot and ringworm are the most common examples. And then, of course, these are all things we've talked about, but they're not always bad for you. They're not always pathogens. There are good things about all of these different groups of organisms, except for viruses, which aren't really organisms, but there's still beneficial uses for them. So For viruses, they can be used for gene therapy. Used for gene therapy. So they can actually be used to insert genes into human cells that don't work correctly. And we saw that in the sickle cell video we watched earlier this year, where the girl had sickle cell and she got gene therapy using actually an HIV virus that had been modified to have the right sickle cell gene, so that she would make normal blood cells. And that was able to be done because of a virus. So that's a really beneficial use of them, is like gene transfer. For protists, one really beneficial protist is algae. So I'll say algae is a producer in ecosystems, which means it's like a really base level food source for other organisms, and it also produces oxygen for the ecosystem. So if you remove algae from a lot of aquatic ecosystems, you like completely destroy the ecosystem. Nothing would be able to survive because you remove like all the food sources basically from the ecosystem. Bacteria is beneficial because it can be used to, I'll say, produces food. And one example is yogurt that's produced by bacteria. Also, it helps digest your food. I think we talked about this in class, but actually like 2 pounds of your body weight is bacteria, because you have so much bacteria that lives in your gut that helps you actually break down your food. You also have bacteria just like living on your hands and living on your skin, and it actually is protecting you from bad bacteria because it kills off like bad stuff that tries to start growing there. So your bacteria, it's called your normal flora that like lives on you all the time. It's actually really good for you. And you would be like in a bad way without it. And then fungi, beneficial fungi they are a food source. So the video last week talked about mushrooms and yeast. And then they are also antibiotics, which the video last week talked about penicillin. So those are some examples of, and again, this was viruses, this was protist, this was bacteria, and this was fungi. This is the first page of your review sheet filled out. And again, if you have questions about it or want to know if your answer was right or questions about the actual review sheet questions, please, please, please join the Zoom or send me a remind, send me an email. Anything goes. I would love to help you. I also would love to have feedback on these videos so that I can just know like if they're working for you, if they're going well. I really miss you guys a lot. I hope that you come Zoom so I can see your face, and hope you're doing great. Bye.